Hello, welcome to this episode of The Daily. My name is Brendan Malone. Well, I have just finished reading an excellent book, and today's episode of The Daily is all about telling you that you should go and read that book as well. It's called God or Nothing by Cardinal Sarah. It's a really important book, I think, in the life of the church for a whole lot of reasons. Now, I always knew that Cardinal Sarah was an intelligent man, but I didn't realise just how qualified he was until I read this book. He's very well read and very widely read, and he has some really important qualification and training in different areas of theology and scholarship and philosophy as well that really come to the fore when answering questions in this book. The book is an interview-style format. A journalist asks some questions, and then he responds at length to those questions, and it covers a range of issues. So it's a really interesting book. It starts initially with his early life and is sort of very biographical, which is just really engaging stuff. And then it also progresses on to talk about sort of questions around issues facing the church today and different theological, liturgical questions about engagement with the culture, etc., etc. There's several things that really strike me as important about this book. First of all is the holiness in Cardinal Sarah's life. It's just so self-evident. Here's a man who grew up and lived in the context of Africa, and obviously there's a lot of poverty at different times. He grew up and he came into his priesthood and then into being a bishop under a time where there was a dictatorial regime in place in his country, and he's literally in a situation at that point where he's living as a bishop, and the only food that he's got is food that is donated by the local Catholic families who that he lives off providence effectively. I think there's probably a lot of people who read that part of the book and thought, yeah, I think a lot more of our bishops could perhaps do with living off providence. That's not a bad thing. So he's very much at the heart of this Church of the Poor that Francis talks a lot about. He also has this amazing intellect, and you can see that intellect really comes to the fore, as I said, in his discussions, and what he is able to draw on as source material, what he is able to draw on as the influences in his life. He is very much Augustinian, in the way of St. Augustine and his approach to the faith. It's really quite a beautiful thing. In fact, he really starts by talking about St. Augustine and finishes by quoting Augustine at the very end of the book. There is also, the other thing that really stuck out to me was his boldness, and I think this is really important. He is a man who is clearly in love with Jesus and has been for his whole life, and there is a boldness to him as a result. One of the things he is really passionate about, and why the book really resonated with me, was he is passionate about calling the church to evangelism. And the fact is, like he says, we need to be going out and evangelizing. And, it really is a challenge. Effectively, we're not doing enough of it. And this book really is a challenge that we need to get off our backsides and go out and take Jesus into the world. And he's really passionate about that. And that is motivated by his deep love of Jesus. His relationship with Christ is real. It's just a beautiful thing. This is not someone whose head is stuck in an ivory tower or in a collection of books. This is a man who is really living the faith. And there is a boldness as a result, which I think is really beautiful. It's very clear to me reading this book that here is a man who would willingly go to martyrdom because of his love of Christ. And that's a really beautiful and profoundly important thing. I think if in future years Cardinal Sarah ended up becoming Pope, the church would be in really, really good hands, and we would see a continuation of that legacy that we've seen over the previous popes. And I think some really beautiful new things would start to happen in the church. I think particularly in the West this is really important. He talks a lot about the fact that Africa will save the church and will save the world. And I think he's right in that regard, because in Africa they have a really strong sense of family, a really strong sense of understanding of God and of faith, and it's just part of who they are. And there's something really beautiful about that African culture that I think is a reflection of what Christ calls all of us to, and is very important for us, the rest of the church, and particularly in the West, where I think we've become a bit complacent. We have become far too comfortable at times, and we have not been as active as we should have. So I highly recommend this book. If you haven't read it, you need to get a hold of a copy. God or Nothing by Cardinal Sarah. Get a copy today and start reading it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily.